I've never had such a terrible first impression of a game than with Atomic Heart. Persona 4 is the only game with which I've suffered this much trying to go through the intro. However, at least with Persona and JRPGs, outside of the exception of Persona 4, you have long stretches of just gameplay, and the ratio of story content to play is balanced. I don't know if it's simply a studio mandate or a terrible choice from the devs, but this doesn't fit the game. This is at its worst here. I've never suffered such a terribly long intro. At least in games like BioShock Infinite, you get to walk at your leisure and play minigames, but not here. You're stuck in a boat for most of it, and then you have to walk, and get this, there's no run feature in this game. It's about an hour and a half before actual gameplay that you get here and there. This horrible intro sequence later bites you in the ass because you realize that the game spent most of its time trying to wow you instead of actually explaining mechanics that shall go unexplained. This video is going to be less edited than my regular output. Honestly, the game isn't worth it, and by the time I would finish, people would have moved on to something else. The game is not great. It's worse than that. It's mediocre. Nothing elicits any response, positive or negative, in regards to gameplay. Some positive aspects do exist, but they all have to do with graphics and music. The studio is comprised, from what I understood, of mostly animators, and it shows. The game has a great art style. It's something I would like to see again. Some of it was pretty eerie, especially the robots. They're so uncanny. Unfortunately, they're poorly designed and redundant, but more on that later. On the musical side, the game remixes known songs but in Russian, and has interesting sound and musical cues. There's of course the presence of Mick Gordon, who after showing his receipts is back on another game. For most of it you won't recognize him until you get to the first boss fight. It then just becomes Doom. Not to say that the rest isn't good, it is. The only part of the audio that is bad is the dialogue. I'm officially done with characters talking. Brevity is the soul of wit. When characters speak very little, you appreciate when they eventually do. The dubbing is already pretty average. In Russian everything sounds better, but you get information overload. Words don't mean anything. It's like when you look at a color for too long and your brain can't register it anymore. As mentioned previously, it really hurts when the dialogue could have been used to actually teach you things, but it doesn't. That's the first real sin of the game. Gameplay wise, sin number 1 is that valuable info goes to the wayside because you're distracted by the dialogue or they just didn't cover it. They do however mention early game stuff 1,000 times. Things that if you did not understand you would have not progressed anyway. It took me so long to realize I could craft ammo and healing packs. The second major sin is the enemies. Despite how varied they are, most of the time you fight only one type at a time, mostly mustache robots. They're poorly balanced. You either destroy them with your overpowered skills, or you get fucked. They fight like they're UFC champions. Imagine if John Jones could withstand a shotgun blast. The headboxers are also wonky. I would get hit by lasers that were nowhere near me. A robot shoots lasers from the front, but it autocorrects at times to get you while you're in its back. Despite the laser not going past the 180 angle, it still hurts me. The worst offender was the first boss, which comes 8 hours in, by the way. More on that later. The boss might as well be from Doom Eternal. The music fits too. It's massive but fast, and the low FOV of the game doesn't help. No, you can't change it. There's times when you simply can't get away because your dash hasn't cooled down or because it doesn't go far enough. What was at first a fairly fun boss turned into a nightmare. Which brings me to the final sin. The game is a pizza of gaming. It pulls all the different gameplay types and tropes, but it doesn't do any of them well, and they're not more than the sum of their parts. Everything is functional, but nothing is fun. Silent Hill has okay shooting mechanics, but is excellent everywhere else, and when put together, it forms a cohesive whole. I'm officially tired of some of these elements because of games like this. Crafting, minimal RPG elements, skill trees, scattered logs. Enough! The robo bitches are not enough to distract me. It seems that they have passion for art, but do they have passion for video games specifically? Nothing in this game was fun. Even if it was your first try, you would think some things would be rough but show promise, but no. Nothing seemed promising here. It felt like a game generated by an AI. Tokyo Ghostwire was given less chance by the crowds, but the director confirmed studio pandering. You can see the diamond in the rough of a pretty okay game, all things considered. And when you think about the fact that Shinji Mikami left Tango Gameworks, well, maybe it starts clicking in your head. Here I just felt like the concept artist used the context of a video game to salvage a dying project. The fact that the game becomes open world doesn't help. After doing fetch quests back to back in a bunker, you're now doing them in an open world with infinitely spawning robots. The game proposes stealth, but outside of crouching, there is no stealth. There's too many lines of sight, you have no skills or tools, and the level design is not made for that. Nothing is elaborate enough. The combat is spongy and wonky, and even when you're not dealing with infinitely spawning enemies, the robots are not particularly fun to contend with. They don't react to hits or weakly. I hit a robot with 6 axe swings, froze it, shot it at the back of its head, point blank with a shotgun. The Clintons would have not done better, and it lived. It took me 8 hours to reach the first boss. The game can't make up its mind on what it's supposed to be. An immersive sim, a linear shooter, or an open world. I had no amusement with this title. I can't even say that, hey, it's a good first try, games are hard to make. I have the impression that maybe they're in the wrong industry. The conception of the game was long, but nothing emerged out of that. Not even that feeling that it would have been great if they could have a good development next time around. Nowadays, games are expensive, even though we have media that's less expensive to produce than a cartridge. Money is wasted on actors that don't perform well and shoving too many things that bloat the budget. If not that, there's politics everywhere, and I have little time. I have a Switch now. I would much rather play that or play other games on Game Pass. Don't play this, not even for free. The closest comparison I have is with the Callisto Protocol, a game that technically works, but where nothing really clicks and some opportunities are wasted. The only reason we're giving it a chance is because of the Big Diddy robot memes. If it wasn't for that, nobody would care. This game is the equivalent of walking home and then suddenly realizing that you're already there. You've done this so much before that you don't really realize what you're doing anymore. You're just going to cruise control. See how no one is talking about Callisto anymore, and it has been not even half a year, 2 months? The same thing will happen with Atomic Heart, and inevitably some asshole is going to make a video with fonts that are too big about how the game was a hidden gem. Mark my words.